I'm Phil Curry, an independent researcher and advisor to agribusinesses. My career spans more than 45 years and includes sales, marketing and senior executive roles in local, national and multinational agribusiness firms. I was a certified management consultant specialising in agribusiness marketing and management for 25 years and recently an academic at University of Queensland. You can see my experience on my YouTube channel if you wish. This presentation is provided to describe how to conduct a regional market analysis. This process was developed and led by me in an ACR project in the Philippines from 2015 to 2018, during which time I visited collaborators and communities 22 times to guide the development of RMAs for vegetables and mango. I hope you find this presentation useful and can employ the process into your future projects. By the way, I acknowledge the truly excellent work undertaken on these projects by colleagues at University of Philippines Mindanao, Visayas State University and Landcare, without whose efforts we would not have been able to develop and refine the RMA process as described in this presentation. The fundamental problem on which we are focused is how to efficiently and effectively enhance the livelihoods of communities of farmers in developing countries. In my experience, the only way this can be addressed is to change the way they identify and respond to opportunities and threats in the market. This means doing things differently than they have done in the past, perhaps for many generations. Of course, this is a significant challenge, but one to which a regional market analysis can contribute. The way agricultural commodities such as fruit and vegetables are distributed in developing countries is changing rapidly. This means that secondary data, whilst useful, may not be as up to date as needed for any project hoping to inform smallholder decision making. Primary data should be collected as quickly as possible. This is consistent with the recommendation of Michael Porter to get into the market early, to avoid a common problem of spending too much time reviewing published sources. Of course, we are interested to learn from previous studies and secondary data, but nothing will provide current data as quickly and as efficiently as the RMA. The other thing that is changing in developed countries is the nature of distribution channel actors. Value chains are often explained as neat single channels between producers and consumers, but of course they are anything but that. They are much more usually complex networks of actors that play important roles, but these roles are changing. No fruit or vegetable growing community can be adequately informed unless it understands which actors exist and exactly what commodities they need. By the way, throughout this presentation, I have provided some complex information which will be difficult to read while the video is running. Simply pause the video if you would like to review the information provided in detail. Anyone who has worked in developing countries knows that agricultural practices are very different than in developed countries. A regional market analysis will not lead to change on its own, but must be part of a suite of support provided to empower farmers and their communities. A regional market analysis will allow farmers and their communities to understand the opportunities and threats that exist. It will also identify partners and potential customers who are willing to collaborate with farmers and help them to change their practices. Farming communities in developing countries are often tied to collectors, and this is a major issue when it comes to change. But pathways forward can be found once farmers and their communities gain a better understanding of market opportunities and find support mechanisms and partners who are willing to help. Before we go any further, let's discuss distribution channels. This diagram is an attempt to illustrate a very simplified flow of produce from farms to consumers. The degree of complexity and the role of specific intermediaries will vary depending on the industry and the market. For the sake of the RMA, let's refer to each different type of distribution channel as a node. For example, in this diagram, we would refer to collectors as a node and wholesale distributors as another. However, in reality, there are likely to be different types of collectors and there will very definitely be different types of wholesalers and distributors, and each of these needs to be identified as separate nodes. In developing countries, there will be many actors who collect horticultural produce from small farms, accumulate it, sometimes grade it, and sell it on to other wholesalers or at wet markets. Supermarket retailing is generally an emerging sector, but roadside retail and wet markets are much more prominent, and there are many hundreds of them. In developing countries, there are also the emergence of more sophisticated wholesale distributors who are increasingly involved with grading and some form of processing, which may be simply washing or minimal processing for on-selling to specific food service customers, retailers, or even wet markets. The real point of the diagram is to illustrate the complexities involved in distributing fresh fruit or vegetables in developing countries, and also to identify that businesses in every node will be seeking a different set of specifications and will have different definitions of quality, which means that they each represent a very different opportunity for a farming community. The challenge, of course, is to efficiently and effectively understand the opportunities and threats related to each of the nodes that exist in a market that is accessible by farming communities, so that the community can make rational decisions about the product and produce and to whom it will be sold in the future. A regional market analysis relies on three separate components, being sampling, interviewing, and analysing. Let's look at each of these in turn. The first step in a regional market analysis is to identify all of the nodes that exist. This is unlikely to be achieved by simply scanning the results of published work, because the market will be changing and new nodes will have been developed since prior research has been published. However, the use of existing knowledge and prior research is a great place to start. In my experience, there is little point interviewing the smallest actors in each node, as they rarely have a lot of broader market knowledge. Of course, they can help provide insights into their own businesses, which allows you to understand the nodes. However, my preference has always been to identify the 3 to 5 largest actors within each node and do my best to interview them. Depending on the culture within the country and the confidence of the team conducting the interviews, it may be possible to have a preliminary telephone discussion with the owners of node businesses to qualify them for face-to-face interview. But of course, it is more often appropriate to simply set up a plan and interview them face-to-face. These are some examples of the different types of businesses that were identified in an ACR project in the Philippines in which I was involved. Some of these business models were new even to the Filipino researchers, which highlights the need to be open-minded when conducting the regional market analysis and not to assume the past experiences and prior research describes the market in its entirety. I recommend that the project team spend some time doing this sampling activity. If there are sufficient members, break yourself into small teams of 2 or 3 and compare your results. Make use of people who are knowledgeable about the market to help you identify different nodes and the specific largest actors within each. Always remember to search for and interview industry knowledgeable people, such as government department personnel, seed fertiliser and chemical suppliers, and industry associations, as they can provide insights into the market as well. Now let's discuss the interview process. Here are the steps required. I'm sure you already know that before you conduct semi-structured interviews, it is necessary to prepare an interview guide. The information that you can see here is an example of the types of discussion points that could be included in the interview guide. Of course, you will develop your own on a case-by-case basis, but the list provided here is a good place to start. Once you have identified what you want to know, it is important to list the discussion topics to be used to guide the interview. This can be a list of questions, however, it is important to recognise that a semi-structured interview should not be a list of closed-ended questions. An effective semi-structured interview is one where the interviewer provides opportunities for interviewees to speak broadly and at length on the topic of interest. I have learned to use discussion point openers such as, "Could you please help me to understand the distribution of mango from farmers to consumers?" As you can see, this will allow the interviewee to speak broadly and at length if they have that knowledge. If they don't, they'll let you know that they haven't got it, and then they'll let you know what they do know. Always structure your discussion so that the most sensitive topics, such as price, are discussed last, and develop techniques for asking them in non-threatening ways. For example, you might ask, "Oh, and by the way, can you tell me the types of prices that you would typically pay for mango?" Practice not jumping in with a question as soon as an interviewee stops talking about a particularly important topic. The pregnant pause that is created will often encourage the interviewee to continue speaking and provide you with more relevant information. Finally, do not be afraid of asking the same question in a number of ways in order to get the information you are seeking. Of course, you must at all times be respectful and definitely do not become annoying by repetitively asking for the information that the interviewee is clearly not willing to share. You can follow these steps to develop your own tailored interview guide. It is important to remember that this is a form of exploratory research. It cannot be analysed using statistical methods, even though you will obtain some qualitative and quantitative data. You should continue to interview people in nodes that appear to be of interest until you are confident that you understand the node. This means interviewing more than the initially suggested 3 to 5 interviewees in some cases. However, my experience is that 3 to 5 is often sufficient if you have been lucky enough to interview the largest actors and if they have been willing to share information with you. Here's an example of the data we obtained by using this RMA method in just one region of the southern Philippines. You can pause the video if you want to see the detail. Here you can see that we were able to find out the weekly demand for each type of actor in all the distribution channels. Here you can see that we were able to find out the buying and selling prices per kilogram of the vegetables of interest by each actor in the distribution channels. This image is a simple diagrammatic representation of the complex flows of vegetables along distribution channels that joined farmers to consumers in the market. These images demonstrate how we were able to present the data collected for analysis as summaries, and you can probably imagine how we were able to use this data to compare the relative attractiveness of each of the distribution channel alternatives for the farmers with whom we were working. Of course, these summary tables were the result of, first of all, collecting the data, then documenting it in detail across many pages of qualitative and quantitative data, which then allowed these summaries to be prepared for each region. By adopting this careful and thorough approach to mapping distribution channel alternatives, we were able to help the farmers develop a strategic plan for market development that was consistent with their capacity to produce. The research team identified attractive potential customers who were willing to collaborate with the farmers and helped them develop the systems required to become reliable and valuable suppliers. And this was seen as a step towards helping the farmers become better equipped to supply distribution channel members who were closer to the end consumer and who would pay more for their vegetables, but who also had tighter specifications. By the way, once again, I acknowledge the very excellent work completed by my friends at Visayas State University and University of Philippines Mindanao in this project, as they did all of the hard work of data collection, analysis and facilitation. One group of colleagues was even able to plot the relative positions of nodes on a life cycle curve and indicated the relative size of each in the same diagram. This was an excellent way to help us understand the relative attractiveness of nodes. I hope this presentation proves to be useful and allows you to understand opportunities for helping farming communities in developing countries to enhance their livelihoods by developing relationships with the right value chain actors, and to, as a consequence, move away from being at the mercy of existing commercial arrangements. If you would like more information from me, my contact details are provided here.